The court had appointed me to represent Mr. Horton. He had elected to have death by electrocution, even though he was sentenced to death by lethal injection. At that time, he can have an option. So for reasons best known to him, he decided he wanted to have a lethal injection. I was appointed by the court to be his attorney. He was required to have an attorney, and I attended to that proceeding. I watched the whole thing and had spent quite some time with him before the electrocution. There's been some great debate about what it is that he said at the end. And his actual last word was yes. And the warden asked him if he had any last words, and his word was yes. But what had happened was the warden had just preceded that by asking him a different question, something about if the mantle placed over his head, if he could breathe, or something like that. It was more inquiry as to his physical situation, whether he could still breathe because of the hood placed over his head and the like. And Daryl didn't respond to that. And then the warden asked him if he had anything else to say. And I think Daryl probably, because his head is covered, his ears are covered, probably thought that the warden was merely repeating the question that he had just asked earlier about whether he could breathe or something like that. And I think that he just misperceived what was being asked of him. And when he said yes, then there was a long pause while the warden was waiting for whatever last words he had to say, and none were forthcoming, so he proceeded on with the execution. So it was a miscommunication, given the fact that I don't think the warden recognized he's talking to a man whose head is covered, whose ears are covered, whose mouth is covered, who's in utter dread and fear, and who's hyperventilating, is what Daryl was doing. So when I understood perfectly what was going on, there was no reason for me to stop or correct the warden because I couldn't communicate directly with him. But those were his last words, but it was as a result of a miscommunication during a horrific execution by electrocution, which was barbaric in the extreme. I think if Daryl had fully heard what was being said and had his wits about him, I think he would have probably expressed regret for what he had done. He did that to me and did that in the last days of his life. That he was certainly sorry for what he had done, took responsibility for it, and was ready, prepared to meet his maker. But I think being his attorney and having conversed with him and understood the dynamics of this, I think that I could say it was just a miscommunication, and I think that should clarify the debate about his last words and what he meant and what he actually said.